Welcome back, everyone. Last time was a very technical class. We talked a lot about how the light goes from the endless and moves through this new system that was created after the tzimtzum, after the contraction. So just as a little bit of a recap, we're going to do the verse of the Ari that we were on last time. והנה, הבחינה המחברת כל העיגולים יחד, the aspect that connects all of the circles together, הוא עניין קו הדק הזה המתפשט מן האינסוף, is the line that comes, or the ray that comes from the endless. It's a thin line, ועובר, and it passes, ויורד, and it goes down, ונמשך, and it is drawn. And the Ari is very specific with the terms that he is using. מעיגול אל עיגול, from circle to circle, עד סיום תכלית כולם, until the end of them all. ודרך הקו הזה, and through this line, נמשך האור והשפע, the light and sustenance is drawn, הצריך לכל אחד ואחד מהם, that every circle needs. So as we've been discussing, there are 10 circles, one for each sefirah, and the way that they receive light after the contraction is through the line that is drawn down to each level. So we already discussed how the light passes, over, it passes. Now, Rav Ashlag is going to explain to us what it means that it goes down. So this is Rav Ashlag. כל התפשטות אור עליון לנאצל. Every spreading of the upper light to the emanated, any time that light comes from the emanator to the emanated, מכונה בשם ירידה. It's called that it's going down. That's the term we use. שהמשמעות היא, meaning, שכמו שמתפשט כן הולך ומתעווה, that as it spreads, it materializes, it becomes more material. וכבר ידעת, and we've already learned, שהזך ביותר מכונה מעלה, that whatever is less materialistic, whatever is more pure, is considered higher. והעב ביותר מכונה מטה, and whatever is thicker or more materialized is considered lower. וכיוון שהאור הולך ומתעווה בדרך התפשטותו, and because the light materializes as it spreads, אם כן הוא הולך ויורד מלמעלה למטה. So if materializing means going lower and being pure, meaning less material, more spiritual, means higher, then when the Ari says that the light goes down, that means that as it spreads, it materializes. We're not talking about physical up and down. וטעם ההתהוות הזאת, and the reason that it's materializing, שהאור מקבל בסיבת התפשטותו, הוא משום שהוא מתפשט על סדר דלת הבחינות. So the light receives a more and more material form as it spreads because it's spreading through the four phases. As we've talked about, שמתחיל מבחינה א', it starts from phase 1, עד ביאתו ופוגע במסך הנמצא בבחינה ד', until all the way down, until it hits the masach, the curtain or the screen, over the fourth phase. And if you need a refresher on any of these terms, I encourage you to go back and watch these classes as many times as you need. ואם כן, הוא הולך ומתהווה. So as it's going and materializing, כי בחינה א' היא הזכה מכולן. The first phase is the most pure. ואחרי הבחינה ב', and then phase 2, וכולו until phase 4. עד לבחינה ד' האהבה מכולן. And phase 4 is the most materialized. So that's what it means that it goes down. So we've said that when the light passes from circle to circle, there's two types of passing. One is that it merges with the light that was already there, and one is that it creates a new entity. And again, go back to the last class number 18, for what exactly it means that it passes through. So now Rav Ashlag is going to tell us what it means by ונמשך, that it is drawn. הערת יושד מתבטאת בלשון ונמשך. Whenever the light is drawn through the line, or not direct, but straight line, like linear light, that's called that it's drawn. והערת עיגולים בלשון מתעגל. And circular light, we use the word that it surrounds, or that it creates a circle. So again, linear light, we use the term it is drawn, like a line is drawn down. Circular light, we use mitagel, that it becomes a circle. Now, what does it mean, the end of all the circles? Hainu b'china daled shebegulim. This is the fourth phase of the circular vessels. Shnikret hanekuda emtzait, which is called the midpoint. V'hi hamechuna hakadur hachomari shebaolam hazeh. One of the names that we give it, the fourth phase, is the materialized ball of this world. Our world, planet Earth, it's a sphere, it's a ball, and it's a physical one, 100% physical. So at the very midpoint of this all, at the very lowest point, fourth phase of everything, is our physical realm. ובחינת האצילות שבעולם האדם קדמון הייתה מתפשטת מתחילה עד לעולם הזה. So now we're getting into how we get from Adam Kadmon, which is the first world that came after the contraction, until our world. So the light spread from Adam Kadmon and then Atzilut all the way down through Bria and Yitzira down to our world Asiya. Ela achar shenesa tzimtzum bet, but after the second contraction, and we'll get into what exactly the second contraction is a bit later, Shnikra Olam HaNekudim, which is called the world of Nekudim, the world of dots. Az nit'ala hasiyum d'atzilut Adam Kadmon levchinat nekuda de'olam haba. Then the end of the emanation of Adam Kadmon, and this is going to be a little bit confusing, bear with me, we'll get through it. Rises up, it elevates to the point of the next world. שמקומה נבחן למעלה מעולם הבריאה, כמו שהתבאר במקומו בעין שם. And there it gets its own place above Bria, like we'll explain over there. This part is very cryptic. All you really need to take away from this is that, one, there's going to be another contraction. So we had already one contraction, Tzimtzum Aleph. So there's going to be a Tzimtzum Bet, second contraction. And two, the way that the worlds spread out until we get to our physical world, there's going to be a change in the system. Up until now, we've had the light coming down through the line with the circles directly down. There's going to be a change. The fourth phase, which is Malchut, so it's the lowest point, is going to elevate. And that's the only takeaway you need for now. This is not the whole point. This is not a full explanation. And if you are still confused, you should be, because I am still confused as well. This is not information to understand everything. Tam davar itkalut hasfirot ha'amur. So let's move on to the next verse of the Ari. V'nei kol olam ve'olam yesh bo yud sfirot pratiyot. Every world has 10 individual sfirot. V'kol sfira u sfira pratit shebekol olam ve'olam. And every individual sfira within each world, kalul miyud sfirot prate pratiyot, has within it individual sfirot within each of the individual sfirot. Bekulam kigalday betzalim ze toch ze, and they're all structured like the layers of an onion. Al derech tmunat hagalgalim hakanizkar besifrei tochniyim. Like the picture of concentric circles that you can find in many books, Yali says. Tam davar itkalut hasfirot ha'amur. So the Rav Asher now explains why the picture looks like this. Why is it concentric circles? Tavin, understand. Al pi haklal hanoda, according to this general rule, she'en he'eder ba'uchani, that there's no exchange within the spiritual world. As we've said many times, things don't actually change or exchange with each other in the spiritual world. It gets a new form, but the original form is still there. All of the light that passes from place to place claims that place forever. So if there was ever light somewhere, the light is always there. Even if it then moves to somewhere else, it doesn't really move. It just is also there now. So every phase that the light passes through, the light is still there. Like we said earlier. And since all of the lower sfirot, so every lower sfira was emanated from the sfira above it. So Chokhmah was emanated from Keter, Bina was emanated from Chokhmah, Chesed was emanated from Bina, and so on. B'derech Siba u'Mesuvav, through this concept of the pusher and the one that gets pushed, or the one that makes the circle and the circle itself. Therefore, you can think of it that the lower sfira passed through the upper sfira. How so? All of the light starts from the endless. That's where everything comes from. Then when we come out, we have Keter. Then Chokhmah comes out of Keter. So if you're tracking the overall progress, if you want to know where Chokhmah came from, everything came from the endless, and then it passed through Keter, and only did it get its individual name called Chokhmah when it passed through Keter and came down to become Chokhmah. And therefore it must be that all of the sfirot are within one another. For example, when Keter and Chokhmah spread out, when they take their individuality, the light of Chokhmah, the light of the Sfira of Chokhmah must come from the endless, because everything comes from the endless. So therefore, the light of Chokhmah must pass through the Sfira of Keter before it can actually become Chokhmah. Because the Sfira of Keter caused its spreading. What does it mean that Keter caused that Chokhmah should come out of it? I also had trouble with this question. What it means is, remember, as we've said before, in the spiritual world, when we say that something came out of something else, or that something draws something else, everything is cause and effect. So Keter comes out of the endless, and the next step is Chokhmah. Now we say that Chokhmah was drawn through Keter and then came out of Keter, meaning that from a cause and effect spiritual level, not a physical Keter pushed Chokhmah out of it, on a spiritual level, Chokhmah had to have Keter happen first in order to become a thing. And in this way, Keter is the cause to Chokhmah's effect. משום שספירת כתר גם הייתה איתו, מתוך שספירת חוכמה עברה שמה, and since חוכמה passed through כתר, קנתה מקומה שם, it has a place there, ונמצאות עתה בין ספירות בכתר. Now you actually have two ספירות in כתר. You have כתר and חוכמה, because חוכמה passed through כתר. ועל דעת זה, אחר שיצאו כל 10 ספירות דאור העליון, ממעלה למטה עד המלכות, and in this same way, by the time all 10 Sefirot have come out and spread to the individual Sefirot, all 9 Sefirot that are below Keter, were all must have passed through Keter. It was the first cause for the spreading of all of the Sefirot. So we had Keter. Then the next Sfira was Chokhmah. So Chokhmah came from the endless, passed through Keter, down to Chokhmah. Then the next Sfira was Bina. Bina came from the endless, passed through Keter, passed through Chokhmah, and is now Bina. And so too for all of the Sefirot. So it must be that all of the Sefirot have a place in Keter, because there is no exchange in spirituality. So if they ever pass through there, that means their light is still there. ואם כן, ישנן בהכרח כל תת הספירות התחתונות, גם בכתר עצמו, מטעם שעברו שמה כמבואר. And therefore it must be that all of the 9 sefirot that are below Keter are included within Keter as well. ועל דרך זו, and through this, יש בהכרח תת ספירות בחוכמה. There must be 9 sefirot in חוכמה. Because there's חוכמה itself, and the 8 below Chokhmah that passed through it. וכן ח' בספירות בבינה, and therefore there's also 8 ספירות in בינה, מהטעם האמור, for the same reason, וכן ז' ספירות בחסד וכו', and 7 in chesed, and so on. ואחת במלכות, and there's 1 ספירה in מלכות, לאותה התחתונה, because it's at the bottom. There's nothing below מלכות, so מלכות is just itself. ונודע, and it's known, שמלכות מעלה 10 ספירות דאור חוזר ממנה ולמעלה. Now we finally get to talk about returning light again. We started off this whole chapter about returning light, and now we finally get to really understand it. When the Malchut sends back up the returning light, המלבישות ל10 ספירות דאור עליון, which are the clothing for the upper 10 sefirot. What does it mean that they're the clothing? It means that they're the vessel. In any spiritual system, light cannot have anywhere to be without the vessel. It must have the clothing, or else there's nothing to hold it. הנקראות 10 ספירות דיושר. So when Malchut sends up the Or Chozel, which is the vessel for what? The 10 linear sefirot. This returning light is called the light of Malchut. There is no other light in Malchut except for returning light. Meaning what? This returning light is also called the 10 sefirot that go up, that go from below to above. And then Rav Ashlag gives us a place in his Taklut Plimit, which we'll get to another time, where he explains this even further. Malchut actually becomes keter of the 10 sefirot that go from below to above. So when we have the returning light, we're looking at the system from the opposite direction. All of this light is going from Malchut all the way up to Keter. So Malchut becomes Keter. שהמלכות נקראת כתר הסוסות ההן, משום שהיה סיבה ליציאתן. בסמוך לה נקרא חוכמה. And the one right after Malchut, the next one up, meaning Yesod, becomes Chokhmah of the 10 Sefirot that go from below to above, meaning of the returning light. So now we're flipping the entire system on its head. And then the third one up from Malchut becomes Bina. So now we have the opposite thing going on with returning light. Whatever is more pure is actually smaller. So it keeps going and going up until Keter only receives the light of Malchut in returning light. So now what do we have? So now Rav Ashlag explains to us how these two systems work together. Ulefikach taskil, and therefore you should understand. These 10 sefirot that go from below to above, are all found in Malchut. Because they all must go through Malchut. If Malchut starts the process of returning light, and it goes all the way up to Keter, that means that Malchut is the Keter of returning light, And then the next step is Chokhmah of returning light, which happens at Yesod. And Binah of returning light, which happens at Hod, and so on. Ki Malchut hi hashoresh shelahen. Malchut is the root of the returning light. V'al ken chanu kulan mekoman b'malchut. They all have a place within Malchut. V'nimtza al ken shegam hamalchut klula me'esor sefirot. So now we have that Malchut actually has 10 Sefirot within it. So we said before, Keter has all 10 Sefirot within it because it has Keter itself and all 9 Sefirot that come below it. Now, with returning light, Malchut also has 10 Sefirot within it. Malchut itself, plus all of the other 9 Sefirot where the Or Chozer is going to go. B'derech HaYesod overot tet HaSefirot d'Or Chozer. And through Yesod, 9 of the Sefirot of returning light pass. Harei Yud Sefirot b'Yesod. So now we also have 10 Sefirot within Yesod. Meaning what? Sefira Achad d'Or Elyon. It has one Sefira, one level of the light that came down, the original light. And Shu Mimala Lamata, that came from above to below. And 9 Sefirot of returning light that came from below to above. Because they must pass through it. And now in Hod we also have 10 Sefirot. How? Bet Sefirot b'mala lamata. 2 Sefirot of the light that came from above to below. Dahainu Ora Hod, which is the light of Hod. The Ora Yesod and the light of Yesod. Ha'over darko, that must pass through it. V'chet Sefirot b'mata lamala. And 8 Sefirot of light, of the returning light, that came from below to above. And the same thing applies to Netzach. So now in Netzach there's Gimel mimala lamata, V'zayin mimata lamala. There's 3 from above to below, and 7 from below to above. And now in every Sefirah there's actually 10 Sefirot. So this is what the Ari meant by saying that every individual Sefirah within the worlds has 10 individual Sefirot within it. Every Sefirah is built from partially Or Yashar, the linear light or direct light, and Or Chozer, returning light. And through this we've built a full system of 10 Sefirot within 10 Sefirot within each of the worlds. שאחר יציאת 10 ספירות דאור העליון ו10 ספירות דאור חוזר, נעשתה כל אחד ואחת כלולה בהכרח מ10 ספירות שלמות. After we're done with this whole process of the direct light and then the returning light, every single one of the sefirot has now included within them 10 sefirot. פרטת זה בפרטי פרטיות עד אין קץ, and it continues like this if you keep zooming into each sefirah, it continues like this with no end. Meaning, within Netzach, let's say, you have Keter through Malchut, and then within the Netzach of that Netzach, you also have Keter through Malchut, and within the Netzach of those, you also have Keter through Malchut, and in each one of them, you can keep zooming in, and there's 10 sefirot there. That must be found through this way of layering through this shape of layering onions, these concentric circles or concentric spheres, if you want. And go to Istaklut Pnimit. That's a different part of the book that we will do soon, where it's explained in a wider way. It's more fleshed out. So now, היינו שכל עליון מקיף את התחתון ממנו, מכל צדדיו בשווה, בלי הבחן מדרגות. So why did the Ari use the example of an onion? Because wherever you take the outside layer, it's above the next inner layer in the top half, but it's below the next most inner layer on the bottom half. Meaning, there's no difference between the different levels. Like we said, if you remember way back, when we were talking about before the contraction, when everything was fulfilled, and it was only about the circular vessels, there was no difference between any of the levels. Because when everything's fulfilled, you can't see any difference at all. But even after there's no light, if we're only talking about circular vessels, remember we're talking about circular vessels, the phases, or the Sefirot, are in concentric circles. So there's no one that's really completely above the other. This is why the Ali uses the example of an onion, because the layers are within each other. Okay. Now we're going to the last verse of the Ali of this chapter. Kol igul ve'igul mikol ha'olamot kulam. Every circle from all of the worlds, asher betoch halal, that are within this empty space, that happened with the contraction. Kol ha'karov el or ein sof yoter mechavero. Whatever's closer to the endless than the others, hu elyon me'od u'meshubach mechavero, is higher and more praiseworthy or more pure than the next one. Ad שנמצא כי העולם הזה הארצי החומרי, until you find that this physical world הוא נקודה אמצעית תיכונה, is the central midpoint, תוך כל העיגולים כולם, within all of the circles, בתוך כל המקום החלל והאוויר הפנוי הנ"ל. In all of this empty space and this open air, meaning this space that the contraction created, our world, our physical world, is the midpoint of it all. And because it's in the very middle and it's the farthest from the endless, and because it's the farthest possible from the endless, יותר מכל העולמות כולם, more than all of the other worlds, ועל כן הוא כל כך גשמי וחומרי בתכלית הגשמיות, it's so completely physical and materialized, עם היותו נקודת האמצעית בתוך כל העיגולים, להבין זה היטב. So, as we said, whatever is closer to the endless, whatever is on the outer layers of the onion, is more pure, higher. Whatever is closer to the middle is less pure, more physical. So our world, which is the very midpoint of it all, is the most physical and also the lowest of the worlds. And understand this well. Now, Avashlag. We already understand, we've already talked about what it means to be close spiritually. We're not talking about space at all, חס ושלום. אלא הפירוש הוא בקרבת הצורה. We're talking about closeness of form. גם ידעת שמאין סוף ברוך הוא עד הנקודה האמצעית, so we also know that from the endless until the midpoint, יש ד' בחינות של שינוי הצורה. There's 4 phases of change in form. שהן 10 הספירות של העיגולים, which are the 10 circular sefirot. Remember, we're talking about the same system and we give it different names depending on what aspect of the system we're talking about. If you don't remember exactly what I'm talking about, I encourage you to go back to previous classes and watch again and again. שהנקודה האמצעית היא הבחינה הד' האהבה יותר מכולם. This midpoint is the 4th phase that is more materialized than the rest. והעיגול הראשון שנקרא כתר, the first circle which is called כתר, היא בחינת השראת השורש של ד' הבחינות הללו. This first circle that is called ketel is the entire aspect of the root of all 4 phases. ומובן מאליו, and it's understood intuitively, שעיגול הכתר, that the circle of ketel, שהוא הזך ביותר מכל הגולים, that is the most pure of all of the circles, הרי קרובה צורתו לאין סוף יותר מכולם. Its form is closest to that of the endless. ובחינה Aleph, Ahava mimenu me'at, and the first phase, which is slightly more materialized than the circle of Keter, is a little farther from the endless in form than Keter. Uvchina bet ha'ava yoter, and the second phase, which is a little bit more materialized, is a little bit farther in form from the endless than the first phase, until you get to the midpoint, which is more materialized than all of them. So because it's the most materialized, it's also the farthest in form from the endless. And there's no need to have a question on this, from what we said before, meaning what? So we just got finished saying that when we're talking about circles, there's no there's no upper or lower. So how can we now say that whatever is closer to the endless is higher, whatever is farther from the endless is lower? We just got done saying that there's no difference between them. So what do we mean when we say that? Because it seems like a contradiction. The point here is, this is after the circles have received the light of the linear light. אז נעשתה בהם בחירת מעלה ומטה וכל התכוונות וכל התקרונות הנוהגות בקו. So only once the circles have received the aspect of the linear light do you start to see a difference between a higher level and a lower level. Something interesting to focus on, and then we'll do the overall takeaway. Without the light coming from the line, the circles would be able to get no light. They would only have ha'ara merachok, what we talked about a couple classes ago, this shining from afar that comes from the endless. But they wouldn't really be able to get light because of the contraction. So even though the light of the line is more contracted than what the circles originally got, this is the only way for the circles to get light. And because of this light that they're getting, we start to see a separation between higher and lower levels. Something to focus on. And the general takeaway from here, for me at least, is that just like with every Sefirah, there's 10 Sefirot within it, and each Sefirah has a certain amount of direct light and a certain amount of returning light, so too in our lives. What is returning light? Returning light is the entire concept from the beginning of we want to receive in order to give a good feeling to the one who wants to give. That is the essence of returning light. So the system cannot be complete without our involvement. This entire world, everything that God has created, was created so that we could finish the job. We have an amazing role here. God created us with the unique ability to create as well. We are the only beings that can do this. So for the rest of the week, look for opportunities where you can give as well. Look for opportunities where you can become like the Creator and complete the system. Have a great week.